This time in the Magick Kitchen podcast, we're talking about offerings and we're taking the headache out of leaving them. I'm Leandra Witchwood.
And I'm Elise Wells.
And welcome to the Magick Kitchen podcast, where we talk about magic, kitchen witchcraft, herbs,
and everything in between.
So talking about offerings, I think the issue around it, the biggest headache, is overthinking the offering. There's so much literature out there for many deities, not all deities and spirits and that sort of thing, about what you're supposed to leave. And this is something that can really get annoying. At least you mentioned something about rose petals and Aphrodite, and oh my gosh, I don't have rose petals, so I can't leave an offering to her. And that's not true. There's other things you can do, and sometimes it's intuitive. Sometimes they will tell you what they want left. What's your experience with that?
Oftentimes, we get caught up in worrying about offending the gods. I think the biggest question overall, the root of many of the questions we get, is coming from fear. And we've talked about this before, but that's a lot of what witchcraft is decolonizing our beliefs on spirituality. It's deprogramming a fear-based Abrahamic, usually Christian upbringing. That's the biggest issue in Western paganism.
Right.
And offerings become this sticking point for a lot of people. They're afraid that if they leave the wrong thing, or they don't leave something often enough, or they don't leave enough of something, or they don't leave it in the right place or on the right day or at the right time, that they will now be on the wrong side of a god. And then suddenly that's going to be the end. And things are going to start going bad. And you've brought bad luck on yourself in this way. If that's you, you're not alone.
Right.
We get this a lot, like I said, and I think it's a common fear because of our programming. So we have to think about where this feeling comes from and peel that back. Your deities are your friends, right? They're more than that, of course, but you wouldn't expect a friend to, turn on a dime because they like chocolate chip, but they were all out, so you got them sugar. It's that kind of thing. That's how you have to approach deity work. Offerings at their core are just a part of deity work. So don't overthink what you have to offer. If it's something that means a lot to you, if it's something that has an affinity, has an association with them that this deity has an affinity for, or if you can find a connection, or maybe it's almost like an inside joke, like, maybe the first time you had a moment with Apollo was when you were at an ice cream parlor. So now you give him ice cream every time. Like, that's great. Right. That's really meaningful. You're not going to find that in a book. Mm-hmm. There's not going to be a book that says that the ancient Greeks used to give, strawberry ice cream to Apollo, but that doesn't mean you can. And I think that's it. Like, we want this outside validation of a very personal relationship.
Yeah. And I really think that is a very patriarchal colonizer mindset, that there's going to be this hell and damnation, this wrath, if we don't get it exactly right. And that's not the truth of it. You and I both have a mutual acquaintance who has Loki as a patron, and he leaves him plastic toys. Who would think of that? But that was a thing for them. Or the one podcast, I mentioned this in a previous episode, but I was listening to a podcast where they're talking about Hecate and leaving her offerings, and immediately I had the presence of her in my head, and she asked me directly, "What would you leave me?" And I said, "Dark chocolate." And she said, "Okay, that'll do." And then she stayed for, there was a few hours, like her presence was there. And I don't work with Hecate. I have tiptoed around the perimeter of her, and or wandered the perimeter of her, but never directly worked with her. And that was what, like, my first like solid encounter with her when she was here. And she asked me what I would leave her. You know, it wasn't like this, well, you better leave me the right thing or I'm going to oust you, you know, I'm going to ostracize you. It was like, you know, I'm just curious, like, what would you leave me? And she was like, okay, cool. Dark chocolate. Nice. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the kind of thing we close ourselves off from happening when we're so obsessed and worried. And, you know, we color our own experiences when we bring something into circle or into sacred space that could lead to a negative experience. You know, it's like, you don't want to show up with the wrong energy when what you're trying to do is, you know, raise energy. Like magic is energy work. Yeah. So we have to bring the right energy to the offerings we're leaving.
The Magick Kitchen podcast is funded and supported by thewitchwoodteahouse.com, offering a variety of hand-blended loose leaf teas as well as loose herbs for all of your ritual, spell work, wellness, and everyday enjoyment needs. If you would like to support this podcast while sipping a great cup of tea, head over to thewitchwoodteahouse.com and find the magic that's in store for you.
So when it comes to who you need to leave offerings for, I think that really, like, some people don't have offerings-based practices at all. Other people have practices that involve specific, like, cycles of leaving an offering. Like, I've seen people, especially in the Hellenic pagan world, who will leave an offering every night for a moon cycle. Or they'll leave very specific offerings. They bake this one kind of cookie for Hera. And that's fine. Yeah. Like, you can absolutely go that way with it. Offerings can be a bigger or a smaller part of your personal practice as you see fit. But as a rule, I think that the who of who you need to leave offerings for is just the big guns, the ones that you're working with every day, the ones that you are connected with, who are helping you. Think of it as like baking cookies for a friend because, you know, you appreciate having them in your life. That's really what you're doing with an offering. Just because it's a holiday dedicated to a deity doesn't mean you have to leave an offering to that deity. You know, it might be your neighbor's friend, your friend on Facebook's birthday. And yeah, maybe he's your neighbor or maybe he's your cousin's best friend's uncle or something. And you're friends on Facebook and you see it's his birthday, but you don't go buy him a present and give it to him. Right? It's kind of the same thing with deity, I think. Like, you don't have to give an offering to every deity because it's the time according to some calendar. Right. It's only if you're in a relationship with them.
Yeah. And that's a good point because I don't leave offerings for every single spirit or energy that I work with. Unless it's something that we agree upon or that I get a sense that it's important. I typically will leave offerings for my land spirits, especially because I live on this land. I'm always partaking of this land. So I will, you know, put out bird seed or that sort of thing. And it's really going to be personal to the situation and to this energy you're working with. So if you were working with Zeus and he's expecting you to leave him something, or Dionysus or whoever really, you know, who are you working with in your path? Like, sit down with them and ask him, like, hey, what would you like and how often? And it's a simple question.
And it's intuitive.
And be silent.
And it'll shift. Yeah. Now, the ancient Greeks left incense a lot of the time. That was the offering. And you can do that daily. You know, that's a lot easier than special cookies that Hera likes, you know. So play around with it. Like, if you're having a low spoons day, you know, you don't have a lot of energy to give, then that's a day for incense. Stick incense. Really keep it simple.
Yeah, keep it simple. Or light a candle. You know, that's probably the one I do the most often is I light a candle, incense. Those are the two things I do the most. And those are, depending on the mood. I probably have about 50 different types of incense, plus the ones that I blend myself. And again, you don't have to do it yourself. You know, whatever your relationship is leaning towards, that's what you use. But I'll open my drawer with all my incense in it, and I ask the question, what do you want today? What will be intriguing for today? And they'll tell me, okay, we want cedar today. Oh no, we want sandalwood, or, oh, we want one of your cinnamon blends or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I often will leave whatever I'm having, like not my leftovers, but like if I'm making a tea, I will just make a second cup. And I'll give that as an offering. I think another question that people might have is, how many offerings do I put out? Do I put a cup for all the deities I work with? Do I have a chock full dining table of feasting, for folks?
Right.
I don't think so.
No.
For me, I do offer a lot of incense. So for me, incense, that's for everybody to enjoy. But then I think if you have cookies, it's not a bad idea to have more than one on the plate. Just kind of play this by ear. And when I do alcohol, there's this really awesome liqueur. Oh, that's another thing I will say. You do not have to offer alcohol to deities. A lot of people believe that that's the number one and only thing. Like even Dionysius, don't give him alcohol if you don't want to. If you're in recovery, don't buy alcohol for a god. It's okay. There's no world. In fact, that's a total misnomer that Dionysius is like the get drunk god. He was actually the catharsis god. He was the god who said, hey, you're going through a tough time. Let's work through it. Enjoy.
Yes.
Rapture and bliss. A really different energy than you get from the front page of Wikipedia. So definitely alcohol is not mandatory. But there is this one type that I can only find this one old man makes about 25 minutes from my house. I found it once and I go get it all the time and I use it for offerings. It's geranium liqueur. It's amazing. It smells great. It tastes great. It's so luxurious. It's bright pink, not in a sickly, dyed way. It just is naturally bright pink. It's
not
really
like
cool.
Pepto-Bismol?
No. And it's not, there's no red 40 in there. This is literally a papu, an old man who just makes it, and he puts it in old, emptied water bottles. It's hilarious. It's
so funny.
But that's actually a pretty common Greek thing. You can even buy wine that's made that way. But anyway, so that's
old water bottle.
Oh yeah, it's just an old water bottle. It just says, Zagori or Avra, the two brands that are big here.
Nice.
No labeling. It sells itself, this stuff.
It really.
But I don't know, I find that so special too. It's made by an old Greek man who makes it from the geranium that grows on his land. It's nice. It's nice. I love that about it. So that's an offering again.
And I think,
and that's not in a book.
I think that's the key right there, is that it has to be meaningful, not just something you slap together or, oh shit, I forgot. So here's my scrap of, my dinner or whatever. It has to be meaningful.
This apple's going bad. I'll toss it over to
Jeez. I can't think of too many deities that would appreciate that.
Yeah. Another way to approach offerings is to remember where the concept of them comes from, which is sacrifice. So Norse paganism, for one example, heathenry is rooted in animal sacrifice. That's a big practice from that region. Why? Well, if you study the geography and geology of that land, you could not farm or grow anything all winter long. So your animals were it. Anything you dried and prepared in the summer and spring, which is only, depending where you live, in Greenland, it's 6 to 8 weeks. You might have had no time really to prepare food for the entire rest of your year. So if you at Yule sacrifice a goat to Thor, you're literally sacrificing a lot, more than you or I in today's world can understand, can rationalize. So that was a massive offering. That was a huge leap of faith. I'm giving you the sustenance I have so that you can protect and provide for my family. That's how much trust I have in Thor as a deity, that I'm going to sacrifice our food source for the next year. Part of our food source for the next year.
Well, and we also have to remember that meat, animal products, was looked at very differently than we do today. We have that very patriarchal vegan image of animal sacrifice and that sort of thing, because Christianity has spent a lot of time demonizing animal sacrifice. Like, don't think of it as you're killing an animal, you're just letting it bleed out and the animal's not being used in any way. It's a very sacred act where, especially even in the Celtic traditions, pork, pigs are very sacred. So not only was it a sacrifice to the deity, say Bridget. So Bridget and swines are very sacred to one another. I had someone ask me recently, is it wrong? Like, it doesn't make sense to eat the pork in honor of Bridget. I'm like, no, it actually does make perfect sense, because the way our ancestors looked at this was very different. And so like goat sacrifices in many African traditions, that meat is consumed by the family. It is not laid to waste. The same with the Celtic traditions from way, way back. It was sacred to that deity, and the family still partook in it because you don't waste anything. And not that a sacrifice would be waste, but it is the killing and the bleeding of the animal is done in honor of. Yeah. And then part of that meal is given to the deity. And like I said, we look at things very differently today in a very vegan, patriarchal, colonistic mindset when it comes to meat and animals, where, we think sacrifice means you have to completely remove it from your presence and you don't touch it. That wasn't true for our ancestors, because meat was so sacred, because they had to consume it to survive. They wouldn't just leave it on the altar and let it rot, because we have to think about it in a different way, because the sacrifice is energetic for deity. They're not literally coming down, manifesting physically and eating the food or eating the animal. It's an energetic aspect. It is a symbolic aspect. And when you, as a practitioner, are taking that meat and you're, preparing it, if you live on a farm and you process your own meat, and instead of sending it to a slaughterhouse or buying your meat from a local butcher or whatever, if you're the one actually processing the meat, then you kill that animal in the name of that deity, and energetically, that's what you're giving. You're giving that animal's life, and in honor of your continued sustenance and in honor of that deity. And it's an energetic exchange. And it, maybe you go without a few bites of that meat that is put on a plate or an altar, but not the whole entire animal. The animal is still used for the family, for your livelihood. It's not this complete removal from your existence, from your use.
It's interesting the way you tied that to patriarchal culture, because that instantly reminded me of Lent. How in the States, now it is very much just the States thing. You were supposed to give up something, one thing. It's going to be soda. It's going to be chocolate. It's going to be TV, right? And for 40 days, you're supposed to sacrifice your enjoyment of that thing in the honor of, I guess, preparing for Jesus to be killed on the cross, right? So that's Lent. Okay. So, but what's interesting to me about that is, you're right. That's partly where this vegan mentality makes sense to people, because they're coming from that same mindset of, I should go without it because I respect the earth. That's interesting. I've never tied that together as like the same kind of thought basis.
Right. There's a lot of things that we do unconsciously that have just been droned into our existence.
Yeah, well, and it's like a foundational, exactly. It's a foundational acceptance of sacrifice means going without, instead of sacrifice means taking the time to appreciate and offer. I never realized how much I loved the word offerings. Like
offering and reverence. I mean, it's all about the reverence.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Well, and it's interesting too, because in Greek Orthodoxy, what Lent is, and in Coptic Christianity, because my grandparents are actually Coptic on my dad's side, and also in Catholicism, but not American Catholicism. But if you go to Rome, this is how they're doing it. For 40 days, you don't eat meat and you don't eat dairy products. So you do eat vegan, essentially. Some people do eat eggs,
Essentially.
which is a bit confusing, but anyway.
And fish, which I always thought was weird. But
well, no, in Greek Orthodoxy, no. And in Coptic Christianity, no.
No,
and
okay.
in Rome, no. Like the
Just out
fish
here.
is not,
Okay.
yeah, it's just an American thing. But they will basically abstain from those things. But what I was talking to my grandmother about this because she's funny. Like throughout the year, Coptics have random fasting days. And sometimes she's really observant. Other times I bring a cake and it does definitely have milk in it, but she's okay with eating it because she has like, she can like rationalize it. Like it's really cute. But she's very strict in Lent usually. And the way she goes about it in her mind, she was telling me, she said, this is the time of growing things. So when we as Coptics take a break, now Coptic Christianity is the first Christianity. It's really freaking old. Their language that they do their worship in and that they read their Bible in and the books in their Bible, all of it are like proto-biblical. Like it's like the one that Peter, Paul, and all them did. The Greeks do as well, but they do it in Greek. The language that Peter, Paul, etc., these guys spoke, the Coptics use that original language still. It's pretty wild.
Wow.
So she said that the basis for fasting, the reason that you abstain from things is because it's springtime. And the goal of this time is to give nature time to rebirth. So you don't eat any animals on purpose. It's not because you're sacrificing them. It's because you're offering animals a chance to rejuvenate.
That makes sense. Makes perfect sense.
And greens are plentiful. So the idea is that you switch to that. Yeah. So it comes from a place of harmony with nature.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. And then see how interesting over the centuries and through the different styles, it's kind of gotten manipulated.
Yeah.
And became a tool of control for people and shame and guilt. And so to turn that one on its head, so our ancient ancestors, pre-Christian, when they partook in a particular animal, I'm going to go back to the swine because that's what I'm familiar with in Celtic practices, is when you consumed an animal that is sacred to a deity like Bridget, you took within yourself the properties of that deity and the animal that is associated. So swines were believed, and swine herders were believed to be especially sacred because they could cross the veil. They could cross into the other world and commune with deity, commune with spirits, the fae, blah, blah, blah. And so they were sacred. The animals were sacred. So when you partook in that animal, aside from the sacrifice, but that sacred act of sacrificing the animals and then using it in your sustenance to survive, you were also taking in as a spiritual act of becoming one with that animal and making that animal one with you. So this is where it became a very sacred act to sacrifice, leave that offering, but also partake in the spiritual aspects of that animal and how it functioned for the deity and the individual.
And it's interesting that Coptics being the first Christians, so most people that would have been the first Coptics, all people really, would have been pagan first. They grew to accept Christianity. Yep. And as we know, same in Ireland, anyone who was evangelized, they just kind of added Jesus to the list. They didn't really neglect what they were doing before. So I think that is really fascinating how it just flows into it, and we can see the degradation of, honestly, like of that relationship to nature that is at the basis of sacrifice now turned to offerings. Are you ready to start living a magical life? Join me in my Patreon community where I am sharing rituals for every Sabbath and full moon, weekly journal prompts, and new on the new moon articles highlighting new practices from around the world. Joining a community can be the thing you need to keep your practice active and engaging. For more information, visit patreon.com/EliseWells or follow the community link on seekingnumina.com.
How and where to leave your offerings is going to be a personal experience, because it's going to, again, you're going to commune with your energy, your deity, your ancestors, whoever you're leaving the offering for. You're going to ask them how do you want this left? Where do you want it left? For my practice, it's typically at my altar, but I have altars also outside. So I tend to have more than one altar around my house. My kitchen, my meditation room, here in where we're recording, I have one behind me, but I also have one outside. So depending on who I'm working with, what I'm doing, and what I have, I will either leave it at my altar or outside in the altar. Indoors, outdoors, doesn't matter. Just whoever I'm working with. Like recently, so this one, a friend of mine just turned me on to this, but I like bacon. I won't lie. And so that leaves me with bacon grease, right? So I use, instead of sticking my bacon grease in a container, putting it in the fridge for later, I have been mixing it with birdseed and making my own suet bricks or pellets, whatever. And so that has been my springtime offering for our land spirits, for the birds, the messengers that come and give me insights to things. So like right now, outside my window here, I have a little container with the suet and peanuts and birdseed and that sort of thing.
Nice. That's nice. Yeah, for me, so the main people I usually leave offerings for are my deities and and land spirits. And for my deities, I leave offerings whenever I can. Like incense is an often thing, but I don't usually, like I said, I have my geranium liqueur that I like to offer. That's usually like a full moon thing, or if something's going really well, like if we've been working on something and I'm feeling the results of that, I'll just spontaneously just come over and just leave them a little something. So that's how I kind of motivate my offerings. It's like when you get those surges of appreciation for somebody and you just send them a little text, you're like, thanks for being there. You're a great friend. I do that, with some incense or some liqueur or a pomegranate. This time of year, we're recording this in the spring. It's a really, like, I'm thinking a lot of Persephone, and so pomegranates feel right. So I don't know. That's intuitive, but I do like to leave them kind of randomly, but as a rule, it's going to be full moons, new moons. Anytime I'm doing a ritual, I try to incorporate an offering to whoever is working through that ritual with me, deity wise. Mm-hmm. But I also, I have a bit of a cat rescue here in Greece. My mom has the cat rescue, but I am then roped into the cat rescue as said daughter. So I often am leaving a lot of offerings for the cats. We have 27 cats, 27 Whoa! In our outdoor neighborhood here. And we live in a town that's mostly a summer homes kind of place. So most of the year, it's just us and 2 neighbors. And the rest of the houses around us are empty. So a lot of the cats are, kind of like they get to know people over the summer, or maybe they're born in the summer and then they never know what it's like the rest of the year. So they end up flocking towards our house. And so I always consider it an offering when I'm going out and about and checking on everybody. We also check them for injuries, see if they need to go to the vet. We check if they have fleas, if they need, they're all dewormed and defleed often. But, so I think of that care of, these cats are our land spirits. Like when I'm caring for these guys, like that's how I see that. I see that as an offering of my time.
Mm-hmm. And then I think that's a good point is offerings don't always have to be food or alcohol beverage related. They're your time, their attention, they're even just sparing a moment of the day to stop and honor yourself is also a great offering to those you work with. Because in my experience, and maybe you've gotten something totally different happening, but in my experience, my patrons, my land spirits, the energies I work with, they want to see me do better. They want to see me be a better person. So if I am not taking that time to, reflect, where's my brain going right now? What downward spiral is my thought patterns, going right now? If I'm not taking time to stop and reflect, and that could be meditation, that could be journaling, that could be just taking a walk and recognizing the weird obsessive thoughts that can pop in my head. And be honest, we all have these weird thoughts where we're like, oh, I have to buy the thing. But why do I need to buy the thing? I don't need to buy the thing. Do I need to buy a thing? I want to buy the thing, these weird thoughts, But if we are not taking time to slow down and just recognize the energy, recognize our thoughts, recognize what's around us, I think that is a disservice to the relationship that we're trying to develop. And part of what is relationship building, right? It's giving of yourself, but also receiving. So if we're not taking time to give and receive, then we're not going anywhere with that relationship. And sacrificing our time. And again, let's reframe our look at sacrifice as energy exchange instead of absolutely abstaining and going without.
Another important part of offerings is how to discard them. So if what you have is animal and nature friendly, discarding it out in nature, if this is a cookie or some fruit, that's a great idea to just go give it to nature. If you have some birds that would eat that, or maybe you want to bury it. Things like chocolate, or what are those there's some things that are toxic to dogs that I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
I've never had a dog, so I'm not.
Chocolate antifreeze.
Yeah.
Those are the only things I can think of right now.
Is it grapes? I think it's maybe grapes. There's like a weird thing that they're alert that's like deadly. I don't know.
It's not good for them yet.
Yeah. Just look it up if you're using something regularly as an offering. Also, some liquids, don't put it in your house plant if you're using a lot of alcohol because you'll kill it.
Oh, yeah. You don't want to kill it. Or just, the same thing. Like if you're going to start using your bacon grease to make your own birdseed suets, like be careful because if it's a hot day and that melts, you can kill your plants.
Ooh, yeah.
Really oily grass or ew.
Make a dog really happy.
Ooh, oh, yeah. Well, then that's a good point because when we leave things out, it won't hurt the dog necessarily, but it could give them some digestive issues if they were to get a hold of that and eat it, because they will.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So keep an eye on that. But I would say as a rule, if you're able to, if it's safe to, it's always good to discard in nature. And maybe that's part of your thought process with your offerings is, okay, well, I know I'm going to offer this to my neighborhood cats or deer or something. So maybe your offerings are more focused on that. Like you intuitively choose things that are better for nature. That's fine. I've never met a deity who's not cool with nature because they are nature. So,
nature, right? They are. And so are we, and we should recognize that.
Yeah. It builds our connection, I think, when we give of ourselves and of what we have to share to nature in that way. I think I've never met a deity that doesn't want that. Join me June 3rd for my next workshop, Connecting with Land Spirits and Spirit of Place. Learn how to connect to your local land spirits, the different types of spirits of place, and why this relationship will improve your spiritual practice. This event will be recorded if you can't attend live. And if you're listening to this after June 3rd, 2023, message me for the recording.
So I'm not sure how much more we can really talk about the subject because it's simple once you stop overthinking it. So I think that's the biggest takeaway here is don't overthink it. Be thoughtful, be intentional, but don't overthink it. Don't think that you have to do these grand gestures every single time. Sit down, get quiet, and learn what your patrons, what the energies around you, what the energies you're working with want to see from you. And I think I will add this one thing. When you're entering a relationship with any kind of spirit, and we talked about this in a previous episode, but whenever you're entering a relationship with a deity, with a presence, with even demons, if what they're asking of you is too taxing, then you have to examine that relationship. So offerings should not be this thing where you have to rush home every day at 4:00 and do the thing. You don't have to. You really don't.
And look at
every energy I've ever worked.
I would say look at where those like pressures are actually being imposed from. Yeah. Is it the deity?
Right.
Or is it you? Trying to. Yeah. I see that a lot. They're like, I promised Hades I would leave him wine every night for a month. And I skipped last night. What happens? Well, did he demand that? Did you win the lottery in exchange for that? Or yeah, exactly. I think most of the time, if not every time, the deity is just not going to take it that, I mean, they're immortal beings. They're not going to be that bummed if if it's constant and
one
it's like
night is missed of a million.
Yeah, like if it's a constant problem and you're like only giving them rotten fruit and you neglect them and you ask for more than you give. That's a different, but if I do not think as a rule a relationship with a deity should ever feel taxing. I agree.
Yeah, it's not, I really don't think they care that much.
Yeah, they won't impose that, I can tell you, because they don't got the time.
Yeah.
Well, they have the time because they're immortal, but they're not going to waste their energy there.
I think it's too insignificant. 30 days, you miss one day, but think about how many 30-day cycles they've been through. It's when you really develop your relationship with deity, with energy, with universal energy, you start to realize that the things that we impose upon ourselves are really trivial. They don't matter.
Yeah. And
it's again, I think it goes back to that patriarchal, linear, colonizer mindset where you have to, this is this, that is that. It's black or it's white. It's dichotomous. Nothing is ever gray. Nothing is ever flexible. But really, witchcraft and worshiping the old gods, they are incredibly flexible. Mm-hmm. I have never known, and I've worked with some serious ones that are freaking scary, but they have never terrified me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like they're not these doom and gloom imposing beings. And I'm not to say that there's not some out there, but if that's something that you're looking to enter a relationship with, then that's a choice that you make. And then there you go. You've made your choice and you've made your bargain. You made your deal or your contract. But I think for most encounters are not like that.
Yeah. And remember to when you're picking your offerings, when you're thinking about when to leave them, all of the questions that we've posed to you today, it's always about your intuition and the relationship with who you're leaving them for. So maybe your land spirits are just really into song. I mean, there's a place in Baltimore that I used to go, and it was where a water treatment plant was. It was a crossroads of rivers. It was where one side went to a water treatment plant, the other side, I think, and I'm not great at geography, but it joined up with that river, Potomac. Yeah, Potomac River.
Probably, yeah.
So it was this great union of the imposition of man on one side with the water treatment plant, and on the other side, pure nature. It was very idyllic over there. Like, I mean, you could stand in the middle and look at one and look at the other and feel a different energy. It was interesting. It was really powerful. And when you went at the right time of day and the right time of year, you could walk across some rocks and sit in the middle of this. And there was a bit of a waterfall it was loud enough that I could sit on this rock and sing to the water spirits there. And no one else would hear me. I hope. I don't think so. I actually went back with my husband to check. I was like,
that you know of?
Yeah, I literally took my husband there for a picnic once and was like, I'm gonna go out there and sing real quick. And I want you to tell me if you can hear me over there. Because I really did not want people to hear me. I'm here for the spirits.
Yeah.
We got a really nice email from somebody about our Connecting with Spirit Guides Locally episode. And she said, I'm not great with bonding with people, but I'm really good at bonding with land spirits. And I was like, I relate hard.
I can, yep. Same here.
But anyway, so, I never once left these guys cookies or incense or wine or soda or anything. It was always just my song. Exactly. And it was so beautiful. It was so harmonious. I just felt so nourished when I was there. It was a giving and receiving relationship because I felt so healed to be in their presence. And I like to think they didn't hate my songs. So.
Well, and how wonderful you think it is for them to be acknowledged?
Yeah, exactly. 99% of witchcraft is acknowledgement. I need to put this on t-shirts.
Yes!
It's
you do.
That's
you do.
It's
we're making t-shirts.
Yeah. Honestly, I want it. I want it on my own t-shirt.
Okay.
If nobody else does, that's fine. I just think it's good advice.
Yeah, I think so. Merry meet,
merry part. and merry meet again.
Thank you for joining us on the Magick Kitchen podcast. Please visit my website, leandrawitchwood.com, for news, information, and more episodes.
I'm Elise Wells, and I can be found at Seeking Numina on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, and seekingnumina.com. That's Seeking, Numina.